Anita, thank you so much for joining me today to be on the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, good. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. How are
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. I'm really well, thank you. Yeah, my pleasure to have you on. So I thought we could start off by thinking about this question. Obviously, do souls exist? That's the kind of overarching question that we're going to tackle today. I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal idea about what the soul is, first of all, and then maybe we can venture into thinking about whether it exists or not.
Yeah. I guess really my view, and this is just a personal thing, something that I've grown up with. I think I kind of grew up within a tradition. It was a Hindu-based tradition, but it
Hmm.
was kind of a branch of Hinduism, and so it was very focused on the idea, the concept of having a higher force, being part of something that is connected to a creator, a universe, not necessarily giving this creator or this entity a name. So
Hmm.
unlike, more kind of traditional Hinduism where we've got gods and we pray to those gods and things, it was more kind of the concept that there is something bigger that we align to. And our soul aligns to that as well. So there's a part of us that we carry that is connected directly to this higher force. And so I think without really kind of being given a huge amount of, we weren't sort of sat down and things weren't explained to us. We were just you kind of understood it just by being in that space and just by kind of the mantras and things that we would chant. And when you had the English explanation of it all, you kind of got the purpose of it, that it was kind of you having this space and this time to connect to that, to connect to yourself, that inner thing that. So the soul for me really is our connection to a higher force that kind of guides us and kind of keeps us moving through whatever journey, whatever stage of existence we're on. So I do believe in the whole concept of continuous life, just one soul entering a body, then entering another body, and you're going through this continuous journey. And so it's not that there is an end to that. There is a journey of learning, exploration, development, growth, and once I think you've got to the end of that, I think that's it. You've reached that point where you don't come back again. So I think that's the way I see it. So
Okay.
the soul is that kind of, you kind of have to go in within to kind of check in with yourself to make sure that you are still doing what you're meant to be doing in this lifetime. So you have moments. So those moments, for instance, where life gets tricky and you're off, you experience those negative experiences, moments, emotions, whatever it is, things happening from the outside. I think it's just your way of kind of having to assess how far away from your purpose you've kind of moved. So yeah, I think it's like a guiding system. That's it. That's how I see it. It's an internal guidance system. So yeah, yeah,
Fascinating. I love that. And in fact, you've brought this up from the Hindu point of view, which is great because that means we can bring in a religious perspective and understand a little bit about that and how that sits with, the rest of Hinduism as well as other belief systems. But it's really interesting because a lot of what you've said actually coheres with non-religious views of the soul as well, because you don't
mm,
necessarily have to be Hindu or belonging to another religion to believe that we have a
no,
soul.
mm-mm,
Which is a great point because I think oftentimes people mistakenly think that you have to be religious to believe in a soul, and it's not necessarily
mm,
true. And also,
mm,
like this concept of reincarnation, the idea that the soul enters new bodies, but that it's still us, is something that isn't necessarily religious, although it can be tied to a religious tradition. So it's interesting. Recently, I spoke about this question of the meaning of life, and you talked about the word purpose actually in your answer that you just gave there. So do you think that the soul is the thing that's in touch with what we're meant to be doing, and
yeah,
that sometimes we can forget that?
100%. I've done past life regressions, which has been
Interesting.
brilliant. Yeah.
I'm doing one
It
in a
was,
couple of weeks actually, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
oh God, what I'll tell you what was consistent. I've done it. I've had three kind of experiences. I've been three different, or I've seen myself be three different women actually.
Wow.
And the one thing, the common thread throughout all of those women's lives has been mistrust, fear of trusting other people. And
Okay.
what I'd done when I'd gone into that past life was you're able to see the experiences or that snapshot of that person's life where things are not going right, where things have kind of almost, they've hit chaos and things are kind of deteriorating for them. But within that past life experience, you're able to go back and correct, you're able to go back and heal and change the outcome of what that person has experienced. And that in some ways, then you helping, because you're releasing that and letting go of that, so you don't carry it in this life. So you can move forwards in this life. So I do think we are connected to all those experiences from the past. So it's not just our experience. You think about, who we are as individuals and all the things that we carry within, on a day-to-day basis that we feel that we've inherited from parents and grandparents and things. And then you actually put on top of that the whole past life experience and all of that you've carried. And if you're not even consciously thinking in those terms or aware that that is even a possibility, you have no idea what it is you're thinking and feeling and believing and therefore experiencing because of those previous lives and those existences that have gone before. So I think it's really important, especially when you've hit a wall in this lifetime, to not be looking at the experience as separate to you and to what you've kind of almost it's not about blaming yourself. It's about kind of, I don't know, finding a way to feel more in control of what you're experiencing, and going into that, going back and looking at what you've brought into this life can sometimes really help you clear things out and move forwards in this path. And I think that's the point. I think that's what we're meant to do. And it just makes things a bit easier, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Simplistic view of it, but that's it's kind of got me through. I think that really has helped me get through some really big roadblocks in my own life, and where I've not needed to go to other people. I've not relied on counsel from friends, family, or professional help, because I think you can sort of connect with that other part of you, and you know instinctively what you have to do, and where you need to take that next step. It's weird, but I think that it's almost like I said, that soul is your guidance system, and when you connect to it, you get the answers that you need to take the next steps, and take those next steps with confidence, even if you haven't got the evidence that things are going to work out. You've got to have faith, haven't you? So when you can have faith, you can step forwards and make decisions that would otherwise scare you to death. So yeah, it's
fascinating. I love that. I mean, speaking of fear, actually, I think a lot of that, again, you don't necessarily have to be spiritual to believe this, but a lot of that does come from the ego. If you think about it, it's the thing that's trying to keep us safe, but oftentimes that can stop us from doing the things that perhaps we're meant to do, that are part of, you might have heard this expression before, but like our soul plan, or this idea. So I'd love to get your view on that. Actually, you've talked about this belief in past lives and the potential for past life regression sessions to actually access those and learn from them and heal from them potentially as well. But yeah, I'd love to sort of, and you mentioned this idea of like trying not to blame ourselves for things, but also acknowledging that maybe it's part of a grander purpose. But yeah, do you think there's any truth in the idea that we, or perhaps our souls rather than our bodily selves, plan our lives in some way, and that we actually deliberately create certain situations so that we can learn and grow, or so that our soul can learn and grow?
I think so. I think there's some, when I look at my own experiences, my own human experiences in this life, I can see it's almost like a circle. I remember saying to somebody, I started off at this point, I had this experience which led me to this point, and then going back, and it's almost like this, I'm doing now what I'm meant to be doing. I feel like I'm doing the thing that I was meant to, that I was brought here to do, kind of thing, in the way that, because every time I've tried to veer off course, I've come straight back. So there's no, to me, I'm 50 years old at the end of the day. So the number of times I've tried to take a different path and I've been brought back here again, it's like you can't, to me, that's like, this is what you're meant to do. This is your job. This is who you are. This is the life you're meant to lead. These are the lessons you need to learn. This is what you've got to fix about yourself, and then move on, yeah, kind of keep thinking that I'm hoping I've learned enough now
Well, that's the thing. And you know, I think there's a lot of kind of resistance to the idea that we have to keep coming back, that our souls have to keep coming back. Because people are, oh, I've had it hard enough this life. Like, how
Enough.
much more,
So trying to
exactly,
come
like how
back.
much more do I have to go through? But it's really interesting what you say about looking back on your life and you know, maybe being able to connect the dots a bit and sort of see that actually this does seem to be part of a plan, because
Yeah.
it's very much in line. I've done a lot of research into people on their deathbed actually, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
their experiences and how they think about their lives. They often say very, very similar things. So they say, like, you know, even if at the time I didn't quite know why I was going through this, normally difficulties, but anything really, they
Mm-hmm.
look back and they're like, my life's kind of like a story, almost like a film.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it follows a clear plot, and it follows a
Mm-hmm.
structured, almost linear narrative that makes sense, even if I couldn't see at the time where I was heading. And it's kind of like the idea, like if one door closes, another opens, doesn't it? Like we often lament our situation and we think like, oh, that was the thing I really, really wanted, and it hasn't come about, my life's over. But actually it's not. Like it could be a way to get into much greater things that are in line with your purpose. So so that's really interesting. If it's all right, I'd love to come back to the past life regression stuff and just hear a
Sure.
little bit more about your experience, partly from a selfish point of view, because I'm doing one in a couple of weeks. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because I mean, if I can sort of play devil's advocate slightly here, skeptics will say that when you're having these regression sessions, you're being led, you know, you're being asked leading questions, and you are falling prey to something called confabulation, which is where you basically invent a memory, not to purposely deceive, but you start to, your brain starts to sort of blur the lines between what you're imagining and remembering, and you start to fabricate these memories basically. But it sounds to me
Okay.
like you had something where it really did feel like you, even though it was multiple different people. So yeah, I'd just love to hear your, like, what you would say to those skeptics out there that might argue that.
This is completely personal, isn't it? So one thing I will say is that growing up as a child, we used to live in a bungalow, and I used to feel really safe because you can't fall through the floor of a bungalow. You're not going to
Mm.
go anywhere, are you?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when we were young, there was lots of parties in the house, and there were lots of people dancing and stuff. And I'd be able to feel the floorboard shaking. And it used to, the terror, the fear inside of me was real. Like there was real anxiety. But my mum would just sit there and go, I don't know what's wrong with you. You know, there's nothing going to happen. No issues at all. We moved to a
Mm.
house after that. Every time somebody was upstairs, and I could hear the floorboards creaking, it would absolutely, it was that same sense of just, I cannot explain the terror and the fear that I had. And I'd never experienced anything bad ever happening, you know, never seen anyone fall down a flight of stairs, never experienced anyone putting their foot through anything, you know, so there was
Sure.
no rational explanation for why I felt the way that I felt. But when I went back into this past life, I'd witnessed myself as the daughter of a family who was kind of like the outcast. It was almost like she had this kind of Cinderella role in the family, and she was kind of the person that ended up doing everything. She was like the servant in the family, but she was part of the family. So she was never given any status or value or anything. And there was this house fire, and the whole family legged it and left her in the house. And that was the only explanation. She perished in the fire. So it was just that the floor, I could see the floor caving, I could see her falling, I could see her, you know, I could see what happened to her. And I remember then going back and being able to kind of change that whole ending for us. So she was the one that got everyone out. She was the one that alerted the whole family to the whole thing. She got everyone out. She was safe, and she left the family. She went on to have a family of her own. So she survived. It was so, and you know, since then, I've been okay. I don't, how
Wow.
do you explain that? How do you explain that? I don't know how you explain that. That's just personal, isn't it? So yeah, you can make up stories all you like, but I don't have that feeling inside of me anymore. I'm not living with that fear inside of me anymore, because I know it's not me. It was what she experienced, and that's what I was kind of still sensing, or you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's
Like you
gone.
carried it over, but actually by going back and somewhat sort of changing what had happened, you've now felt like that's kind of healed that
It's
part of you that
gone.
had that
Yeah,
fear. Yeah.
it's gone. Because now I can be downstairs, and I can hear the kids upstairs, and I don't sit there going, oh my God, what the fuck's
Yeah.
going on?
And
I
that
don't
must
have
be quite
that.
surprising in a way, I imagine. Like if
Yeah,
you've had that for such a long
yeah,
time up until the point that you
yeah,
had that
yeah,
regression and you
yeah,
just, I feel like you almost, because I've got like certain phobias as well, and you almost identify with them like they're an inherent part of you that can't be changed. So it must
yeah.
actually be like obviously very nice, but kind of strange maybe to now not have that feeling.
I mean, that regression was years ago. That was probably about 10 years ago that I did that. I remember talking to everyone about it. It's like, I don't, how has that happened? And
Yeah, how is
everyone's,
this possible?
yeah, you get people looking at you like you've lost it, completely. But I'm like, I don't care. I'm cured. I'm
It
fine.
doesn't, that's the thing. And again, again, to the skeptics, you could say, well, oh, there's another reason for it, but if the effects are good, so be it.
Yeah,
Like if, especially if other
exactly.
kinds of therapy haven't necessarily worked, or you've always had that, again, like if you can't pinpoint it in this life, it does seem quite odd, doesn't it? Like where is that actually coming from?
Where
Because
does it come from?
I know,
Exactly.
I
It
know.
just doesn't make any sense. There's no memory of anything bad that no
Mm,
one's told me about or anything, but no, it
yeah,
was a weird situation.
yeah.
Yeah, really weird.
Yeah,
But
it is. But I mean, I like to approach it with an open mind, but I know what you mean. Sometimes people look and they're like, what are you talking about? Past
yeah,
lives? Like, they're kind of not used to it because it's not talked about that widely. Although I do feel like that's shifting actually. And I don't know if you've ever listened to it, but the Next Level Soul podcast is a really good one to listen to because
okay.
I
Yeah.
think you'd quite enjoy it
Yeah.
because they talk about this stuff very openly. What the host and other guests on the podcast say is in the last few years, people seem to be a lot more open to spiritual ideas than in the past. I'd love to hear, like, do you agree with that? Do you feel like there has
Yeah,
been more openness?
100%.
Mm,
100%. Yeah, I mean, I could go into the whole reason I got into all of this, but it's not, I don't think it's right it's just, there's a whole kind of, there's a trigger, isn't there? I guess there's always a trigger that kind of propels you into a direction that you never thought was ever going to be something that you investigated or,
yeah.
became interested in. But anyway, it
Mm,
was, yeah. So the more I kind of delved into it, the more at home I felt, the more peace I felt. And I think that's the main thing as well, that and I think that's what people are craving, aren't they? We live
yeah.
in a world that is just so, it's just chaotic and
Yeah.
so full of pressure all over the place, and that need to switch our minds off and take a step back and take back our own minds and space in our own minds as well is, I don't think there's probably been a period in history that where people have needed it more than now, because there's
Mm,
just it's relentless. The connection that we have with one another is great, but it's just non-stop and not healthy in a
yeah.
lot. So I think, yeah, that there needs to be a conversation around moving away from that, and that is happening more and more, but I think we've created a world that requires that as well, because there's no balance, is there? So and I think this gives us, yeah, you think, what are we doing it all for? Why are we living these
Exactly.
crazy little lives? We're always on this little hamster wheel all the time. And when you get off, it's just so lovely, isn't it? Not to be connected to it all. And
Oh,
I think that's what
100%.
spirituality gives. I think definitely that's what it gives me.
Yeah.
I try and I try and do meditations. I try and meditate regularly because I think that's really important, because it gives you that moment to come back to the essence of who you are and what are you doing and where are you going and why are you doing what you're doing. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I think that's, and I remember the lady that I learned from saying there are lots of shifts happening, and you'll find that more people are becoming attuned to things. And I think, you can see it, can't you?
I
Yeah.
certainly can. And like you say, I think there normally is a trigger for people. And I think my trigger was when my nan died a couple of years ago, I started looking into the dying process and near-death experiences. And I just
Mm.
found it shocking, or like in a kind of good way, in a comforting way, that people
Mm.
were sort of like clinically dying, but coming back to
Mm.
tell the tale. And again,
Yeah.
it's weird.
I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing. I'm obsessed with mediums as well, and I've done courses on trying to kind of, read, read people and things like that. I've just freaked out. I get freaked out by it, but I love
Fair.
watching. I do, but I just, people that can do it, and like one of the questions, just in terms of like how much peace that gives somebody,
Yeah,
when somebody that is a complete stranger tells them their loved one is safe, is okay, and they're acknowledging them, and it's just knowing that they're never really gone, and
yes,
how much peace does that give us? We know that there's a chance one day we'll meet again, and
yeah.
that must give you so much, just yeah, peace of mind.
Comfort as well. Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, to circle back to our question about the soul, that does suggest if you see the soul as a kind of immortal part of a person, which I think, is that fair to say that that's kind of your
Yeah.
definition, that it's part?
Yeah.
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 So from that point of view, like you say, our loved ones are never really gone. And again, having heard like tons and tons and tons of different near-death experience accounts, a lot of people actually say, having died myself, clinically speaking, and come back to live to tell the tale, I've actually heard several accounts say, I still grieve my loved ones who have passed, but not in a way where I feel like I'm never going to see them again. They grieve them in a way where they miss their physical presence, but they're
Yeah.
very aware that their spiritual presence is
Yeah.
actually
They're
very
with me.
nearby. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I actually did a podcast about is there life after death recently, and I mentioned a statistic which blew my mind when I was doing all this research into death and dying and
Right.
NDEs. But it said that over 90% of people who are on their deathbed will see their relatives, their dead relatives. So
Really?
yeah, mind
Really?
blowing.
That is, isn't it? That is. But I think, yeah, whenever you listen to somebody talking about that, I just think that's I think it's fascinating. I really do. Yeah. It just makes you think that, yeah, it isn't over, is it? It's not
Yeah.
over. It's
And there's more to life, like,
yeah,
again, to tie it into purpose and meaning. It's very easy,
yeah.
I think, if you don't believe in a soul, and again, you don't necessarily have to believe in it as a kind of immortal part of us, just that there's something more to us, is quite, I
Mm.
think, comforting. And
Yeah.
again, it's not to say that that's the only reason why you should believe it, because I think you can sort of like verify it, because again, I can tie it in with my beliefs about life after death, but I definitely think there's something more to us than just our physical selves, which I never
Mm.
used to believe. I used to be a proper
Mm.
skeptic. I don't
Mm.
particularly
Mm.
have a religious background, so there was
Mm.
nothing really, I didn't go to church much at all when I was younger,
Right.
so there was
Right.
nothing in
Yeah.
me that sort of like would make it natural that I would believe in these things. But having actually looked into it from I would argue like a scientific perspective, like people that actually died and have it had it happen, as well as the past life stuff, especially when you find like kids that have past life memories as well, I find fascinating, because then
Yeah.
they have like really specific stuff, and you can actually match it up with real life people,
Mm.
and then
Mm.
that's a whole
Mm.
other thing. So
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I think said to my kids if it was something that they wanted to do, but I know that the lady that I deal with had said she wouldn't do it with anyone that was under, I think it was 21.
Oh
She said,
really?
yeah. So yeah, I think I don't know what the reason behind that was. I think there is a view, isn't there, that they are closer to their previous lives anyway, being younger. So I don't
True.
know if it's something that would potentially upset them, but they might not be able to. I don't know. But
Handle
if
it. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Actually, one last question, if it's all right, I'd love to ask you, because you mentioned obviously your regressions, and I found it interesting actually the fact that you were saying like her life rather than my life sort of thing. So maybe that's something we could explore another time. But when you were talking about that fire and the ground, the
yeah.
floor sort of
Mm,
opening up, and
mm,
obviously that
mm.
potentially being the root of your fears. Again, this is more of a selfish question because I'm doing a past life thing in a couple of weeks. But one of the things I was a little bit spooked by, if I'm being perfectly honest, I've never done it before, it's new to me,
Yeah. Mm.
was remembering a life where something traumatic like that happened. So
Yeah.
I just wondered if you felt like, because I'm very sensitive, obviously, with stuff like that,
Okay.
like, so I just
Yeah.
got a bit
Yeah.
concerned. Like, did you feel like really horrified when you were sort of seeing that, or did it feel like you had a kind of distance from it?
No, no, because I think the way it was framed was it doesn't matter how bad the circumstances were, because your job now is to go back and change it for that person.
Right.
So knowing that, you could see something that was really upsetting, you're not leaving that person in that situation.
I
You're going back
see.
in to correct it. You're going back in to improve what they experience next in their life, and then seeing her with her own family, seeing her accepted and connected to a whole new group of people where she was loved because she didn't have that love.
Mm,
I just kind of felt like that was good. That was really good. And it's the same with the other two regressions where it was women that were kind of caught in really difficult circumstances, and they just did not know who they had around them that they could believe in and trust and put their faith in. And the purpose of, I always felt the purpose of that regression was to go back and correct that for them. You know, there was another lady that was caught in she was almost like in some kind of prison cell, and she was heavily pregnant. She wasn't able to escape. I think she'd been accused of witchcraft or something like that. I don't know what it was, but why she was there. But I remember seeing her all in black. And there was a man that saved her, a man that came out and actually rescued her. And that was like a big thing for her because she just didn't have that trust. And I saw her with a family. It was like these women just had been so disconnected from their families. And so by going back in again, you're able to kind of fix that ending, and they had that connection, they had that love that they didn't have previously. And so I don't think you fear that then. I don't think, you know, you're going in with a purpose, you're going in with a job. You've got to correct this for that person, because then by correcting that, you're making it potentially easier to correct your own situation here now.
Yeah.
It does directly link to a situation that I'm dealing with. So, you know, I've helped you guys. I need to help myself now, you know.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And again, you know, like there will be skeptics who sort of, you know, question.
100%.
Yeah, but
I'm not there to, like, you know, convince
exactly.
anyone. This is
Exactly.
me. I'm happy
Exactly.
believing this.
Exactly, 100%. And if it's had that impact on you, I think there's remarkable things to be said for that. Same with near-death experiences. There's a lot of naysayers out there who say just the brain hallucinating. I think there's so many cases where we can, you know, dispute that idea. But the fact of the matter is, even though it's difficult for people to reconcile those experiences, a lot of people came out changed for the better by miles, right? They have a completely different perspective on what matters in life. Maybe before they were very shallow, superficial. They just cared about, like, you know, superficial success. They come out, they get more compassionate, you know, more aligned with their true self on a soul level. And I think, like, you know, it doesn't matter what people say in terms of like the veracity of that, the effects are real. So even if you can question the process, the effects cannot be disputed in my view.
This is it. And if you're living a different life, or you've connected with a purpose, you understand that every time you stray from that purpose, life is going to kick you at the bum, basically. You know what I mean? And you've got to tune into that and recognize that. And I think that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, you know?
And I think you use this word control, I think, right at the beginning, and taking control of your life. And I think that's so useful, because otherwise it's so easy to see yourself as a victim of life circumstances.
100%. I don't agree. But yes, there are some terrible things that people experience in life that are beyond their control, and nothing that they could have done. Do you know what I mean? It's not explaining everything away, but the things where, you know, there are lots of times when and we're all guilty of it, just sit in a big hole and blame the world for everything that's happened to us. And no, it's not that. It's not that. You have to, as hard as it is and as easy as it is to blame other people for stuff, you have got to look at your contribution to things as well.
Definitely. And I think it's life-changing in such a wonderful way, where you can take that agency from it. And like you say, there are things that are out of your control, but looking at the role that you played, and also, even if it was something that genuinely was out of your control, what did you learn from it? If you learned something from it, it wasn't a waste. And again, you know, we can go back and we can look at those things. They were horrible in the moment, but did we learn from them? What can we take from them? I think is a really powerful note to end on. So thank you so much. That's flown by. That's been I could talk about this with you for hours. It's absolutely fascinating. I didn't think we'd go down the past lives route, but I love it. I think it's fascinating. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like that's opened my eyes quite a bit.
Well, enjoy yours as well. When have you got it?
A couple of weeks from now, I think it is. Just over a couple of weeks.
I'd love to know how it goes.
I will definitely keep you updated. I will let you know how it is, and we can share notes on our experiences and see what it was like. Fantastic. So, brilliant. Well, thank you so much again for joining. If people want to find out more about your tutoring services, where should they go?
I'm Anita Oberoi, and I work with kids who are in year 3 to year 5, preparing them for the 11 plus. So my website is headwaytuition.co.uk, so you can go there and fill in the form if you're interested in a discovery call.
Amazing. Well, that sounds great. And I loved what we were talking about at the beginning about how you work in a way that I would deem to be holistically with students, actually. So you are preparing them for those exams, but also kind of grounding them and, you know, helping them to manage the stress of that, which is, you know, obviously so valuable in its own right. So brilliant. Okay, well, I will leave the links to your profiles there. And again, thank you so much for joining, and hopefully have you on back again soon to talk about something similar or different, depending on what you're interested in.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
See you.
Bye.